So, which brave soul wants to say what that means to them? And that means you can talk about it from a abstract point of view, or also just in your own lives, how that manifests itself. And I'm an old school teacher. So for any who have been school teachers, I will call on you in the next 5 minutes. If nobody talks, I can only take so much silence. So probably better to just speak up now.
Okay, I'm just going to say, I've taught preschool for 35 years, no longer, and I think a form of activism for children is talking to them about anti-bias education, helping to really understand what that means, eventually teaching them how to be allies in concrete ways that they can understand themselves, but also you can talk to them at a very young age about history, and you should talk about history, and so, yeah, I think actioning begins there with the point of view, and that they can actually, as scary as it might be, they can stand up, and they should stand up. And what is that? How do they do that? So, and again,
so just to carry this out a little bit, it can be conversational, and you can respond to what somebody else says as well, so that we're not just parallel talking, but people can respond to that as well.
So I'm in this space, Hillary. I just retired after 40 years in early childhood education. So yeah. So what you just described, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of what's been talked about in the early childhood space, if not the K-12 space, but especially with young children, is, changing the system so that the predominant right now, the research predominant, suspensions and expulsions from even preschool are Black children, especially Black boys. So it's being aware of that and putting in place, including the Office of Head Start at a federal level has put in place not to permit expulsions or suspensions anymore in programs. So it can happen at the system level. I'm also involved in Maryland. There's a trainer of trainers around equity in early childhood education. And I'm in a cohort. We are been waiting for 6 months now after being trained to get the package to deliver this kind of a scripted thing that we're allowed to adapt, but something to trainings to provide to early childhood caregivers and educators in the state. So, and I'll be honest, to me, that's comfortable action because, Lou, I've been a teacher too, and teaching activity, it's always like a little bit of performance and we're stepping out of ourselves. I think the harder activity is crossing lines, having conversations with people that are different from ourselves, and really creating friendships with people that are different from ourselves. I think those are the ones that are most close and personal, that get to, the things that I've been taught to be fearful of in my life. That's the harder action, but at least I'm able to do these other in public space actions that do, I believe, kind of help the cause.
I appreciate that.
I think for me, activism involves action. And I think whatever you do is an action. If you do nothing, that's an action. But like what we're doing right now is activism. The people that would go out and march is activism. And we need to be able to move forward. And I think idealism is also necessary because we need to have the plans or the ideas or what we hope to accomplish, but we also need to put that in practice. And like you said, Lou, everyone has an expertise, but nobody is an expert. We all have things we're good at, and we have to be willing to use what we're good at and put that on the line to make progress in how we see fit. So we have to be able to take our idealism. This is, in an ideal world, this is what I want, but you have to be able to put movement behind that, or else it's not going to get anywhere. So we need to be willing to, and another thing that we always talk about is skin in the game, where you have to be willing to put yourself out there and to do what you believe in order to accomplish what you think is right for this world.
Appreciate that. Diane?
Thank you, Lou. This is a really important question. I'm glad you started that way. That was what I was wondering about. I was wondering what for the people who come here today, what brings us here? Why do we come here to move our activism more? And so yesterday I was I was involved in something, and it's the same kind of an answer that I have, and I thought about. And so as you think about what it is you do, or how do you move from idealism to activism, or why? And so I started to ask myself, what am I willing to struggle for? What am I willing to, as Frank said, put your skin in the game, but what am I willing to receive pain about? And what am I willing to do and continue to do, even when you're being pressed back or pushed down? And so, I mean, that's one way of but that's just in general. So, but activism in the racial justice arena, I think useful activism is all over the place, and certainly the teaching. Right now, we can see that teaching is getting to be at the center. It could be absolutely at the center of the challenge. It could be very activist, very painful, very much at the center of the bullseye. If you're trying to teach anything Black to the kids in school, we may not have 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we wouldn't think, that's just normal. But now, here comes Jordana, glad to see her. But now teaching kids, Black, especially Black, and we always go to Black because Black is really the target. That's always the target. So that's what I think that the people who are teaching, and I'm glad to see Alan is here and Hillary's here and Larry's here, teachers. And so how do you even be a teacher when it's starting to be against the law in states to teach? How do you do that? So you've got a lot of skin in the game there.
I just wanted to add quickly that, white privilege, something that as white teachers, we have to really dive deep into that if we're going to be effective. And there's a lot of diving I have a lot of diving more to do about that, but I think it's key. And I'm not saying how great I am at all, but I'm just saying I worked on workshops with parents, with several other teachers, and it was very interesting. It was good, but there are a lot of layers and defensiveness and all sorts of stuff. And I'm filled with it myself, of course, but it's something very important.
So I really would like to hear from everyone. Obviously, I can't make you do it. If you were in my classroom, I'd find ways to make you do it. I promise you. Either through non-corporal punishment or some kind of gift that you could get. Seeing that I can't do that, I'm trying to inspire you all to share, because I think this is the richness of a conversation versus people talking at you. So that was my second attempt. Thank you. There we go.
I can speak. So I want to go back to your initial question when you said, how did you feel when you saw the title of today's session or something? And I feel very excited when I see moving from idealism to activism, because in my own work, I guess, around anti-racism and building an anti-racism practice, most of my work at the moment is around education, like educating myself. And the activism that I do tends to be coming here, and then I tend to speak out. I write a lot of letters to a lot of organizations because there's a whole bunch of, I write to my MP all the time. So I do a lot of things like on my own, and there are some communities I'm active in, but I want to do a lot more. So I'm thinking about that, like, what do I do and how do I do this and how do I express this activism I feel out in the world, and do more of the things that I'm already doing, or make what I'm doing more vocal, or it's things like that. And I also feel like my own education is a huge piece of activism, just being aware, even if it's just of my own privilege as a white person and how I operate in the world and the impact that has, that just feels important to me. And I was thinking, because I'm also a teacher, and I've been thinking a lot about like the world of classical music, which is the world I come from, and how we need to decolonize classical music, and how I can do that, and various ways I can do that in my teaching practice as well. And it's even things, it's a lot actually I could say. I don't want to, there's a lot I can say, but it's even things like when I was hearing, you know, all of the teachers here talking, it's things like how to go into an education structure where you're not supposed to have conversations at all. Like, I remember being a student, we weren't allowed to have conversations. You sit in the class and you do what you're told and you go home. So it's even like bringing this kind of work into that context creates a massive challenge, and is a form of, yes, Alan, what? Yeah, it's a form of activism. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking because I don't think I'm making much sense anymore. But that's kind of where I'm at. It's a lot of thoughts and trying to get them out into action now.
Well, a couple things. First of all, you're making lots of sense. I think there, and people who know me know that I don't massage people. If I thought you weren't making sense, I'd tell you. But what I think you're doing is what we need to be doing in society, what we do as teachers, our work is about inquiry and asking questions and thinking about things. So you're doing just that. Somehow we always think that if we're making sense and talking, it should be we have some correct answer. And if you don't have the correct answer, then you're not making sense. That's just kind of Western thinking. I call it bourgeois thinking. Like, you have to have an answer. So, and some of us, we do have answers as well, and we should own them and celebrate them. But I just wanted to bring that up because that's a good example, because one of the things that happens to our students, right, particularly students of color, they think they're stupid because they don't have the answer. So they don't even want to ask a question because, oh my God, I'll be stupid. It's the only time you're stupid is if you don't ask the question. So, I mean, I will jump in every once in a while. So there are other people here who haven't spoken that I have rich experiences in activism. I'm going to call on Larry, and then I'm going to call on Jordana to talk about some of the way they think about this and how they do their work. And of course, you can say no. I might change it, but you
Jeff
can.
had his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say, Lou, there's a
Oh,
little
Jeffrey
thing.
has his hand up. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Thanks, Frank. There's a little thing on Zoom, which you're probably not hip to, which is a little hand raised in the corner icon, because I was trying to respectfully wait. But I did want to jump in because I wanted to latch on to what you said in previous speakers about schools and teaching, because I'm yet one more among us who's an educator. And kind of pick up what Lou said there and some others. I think part of our work is less about, well, it's important to teach history and bring in literature. What's really important is, for me, setting up schools in which students have voice, and that they feel that this is a safe place to bring in their perspective, their own histories, and their own cultures, because no matter what the prescribed curriculum is, it's not going to be inclusive enough of every kid's life. And what I wanted spaces where kids can have voice, kids can help shape curriculum, and then kids can help from that learn what is it like to organize, what is it like to speak up in a space, and leave my classrooms a laboratory for how to have voice and autonomy, choice, make decisions. It's not about right and wrong answers. It's about everyone's collective experience, which is kind of what Lew said coming into this. As teachers, we have expertise, but I never know. I'm always learning from my students, because how can I ever know the diversity of all of their lives? And that's what needs to be brought in to classrooms, and to honor that, and from their own lives and histories to find their own paths forward. That I'm not going to have all of that in my menu.
So Jordana or Larry, are you okay with chatting?
Yeah, hello everybody, and it's funny, I'm having trouble finding my own voice, and all of my work is about helping students, has been said by in many different ways, finding agency and acting on their agency and feeling empowered to act on their agency. I'm struggling right now to find my voice in this conversation. I think what I would talk, well, I think the best thing for me to do is to talk about what I'm doing right now, which is I'm retired. I retired in 2007 from teaching in the classroom, and I taught history, and I taught about race equity and gender and so forth. I also, in all fairness, you know, I'm an evolving revolutionary Marxist, whatever the hell that means. I'm so far to the left right now, I scare myself, as I often joke. But the project that I'm working on right now is the history of lynching. And I'm working with 5 other teachers, retired teachers, and to teach the story of lynching as a device for terrorism and the dismantling of radical reconstruction, and to build and restore and redeem white supremacy in the face of reconstruction. So we're building a curriculum, and then we've raised about $50,000. We've been working alongside Northeastern University Law School that has a lynching project under Professor Margaret Burnham. And this is about finding and reestablishing the narratives of probable lynching victims. And I say probable lynching victims because most lynchings were not the big public hanging and, you know, and torture and burning and castration and all of that. Most lynchings were on the QT, and the narratives were forbidden. So this is about, and I'm all about learning your narrative and teaching each other our narratives and how to teach a narrative and how to write a narrative. And so this is a curriculum about specific cases of lynching. And we're taking a group of teachers down to Bryan Stevenson's lynching memorial and museum in Montgomery, Alabama. And it's a cross-curriculum project that is teachers, not just history teachers, but all kinds of teachers, all kinds of grades, to hopefully be impactful and find out ways that they can teach about racism and white supremacy. And to emphasize the resilience and the resistance by African Americans towards their attempted victimization by white supremacists.
Larry, can I ask you a question? I see different numbers of maybe, you know, probable lynching victims. What is your sense of the numbers of people that were lynched over kind of the whole period that we're talking about?
Well, That's an interesting question, Diane, because I say it's interesting because Margaret Burnham and Brian Stevenson, probably the two leading experts in this whole, they have a little debate amongst themselves, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. That's part of the problem because a lot of the lynchings were criminalized. The narratives were criminalized. You couldn't tell the story. You couldn't discuss it, right? So the answer to your question is between 4,000 and 6,000 is the usual number. And lynching basically comes to they just passed legislation in Congress and the president's going to sign it, an anti-lynching law. Imagine this, a federal anti-lynching law for the first time in our history. So most lynching, we believe that most lynching stopped with the advent of the civil rights movement in the 60s. And it was replaced by mass incarceration and the capital punishment. So there's state lynching, there's state sanctioned terrorism, let's put it that way. I mean, everything from police homicides to capital punishment to mass incarceration.
So this is important stuff that I was talking about, but I want to kind of bring us back to the question again. So Jordana, could you talk a little bit about how you see this thing of idealism and activism and how you have viewed it in your life and moving from these ideas to something actively struggling against whatever we're seeing?
Yes. So thanks, Lou. I'm sorry I got here late. And Susie had talked about herself and reminded me of the thing that, not that what she's doing I think is correct, which is that she's focused on her own learning. And Lou, I mean, you may have heard me say this before, but one of the things I've noticed among whites when I've done race talks and other events and just with people in general is they're very focused on action without having taken the steps necessary to become effective anti-racist, meaning that they're sitting in their own fire, they feel shame, they are learning and unlearning about being white and whiteness and the history, the colonial history and other history. And I feel, and I know others do as well, that unless as white people we do that, there's no action we can take that's going to be helpful to anyone. My focus is always working with other white people and trying to get out of their minds that the problem is with Black people and what can we do to help Black people and people of color? There's nothing we can do. People are in trauma, they need to heal, and they don't need those of us, barging in there and what can we do to help you? No, we need the help. We need massive help. And some people don't know where to start, but I think the first part is before getting to action and activism, which is important, I'm not minimizing, but we are going to be useless if we don't take ourselves through our learning and unlearning and feeling that discomfort, the shame of our legacy. I mean, I have no problem saying that, and I know there are whites, I didn't do anything, I didn't, this is not my responsibility. Well, it is every white person's responsibility. And it's a very difficult journey. I've been on it for a long, long time. I mean, I don't know when Susie started, but when I listened to Susie at this event and others, she always goes back to that she has to learn and unlearn. And I think that that's the right way to do it. And not jump to the action step because that's what makes us feel like we're going to be useful. So those are my comments.
Well, I appreciate that.
Can I ask Jordan a question? Just
Yes.
where you see the transition from doing that self-work to doing activism? Or is it like you're saying no activism until you get to a certain threshold? Or do you do both simultaneously? I just want to know, I have no answers. I'm asking, as you were saying that, I was kind of wondering how you saw that happening.
No, that's it. I mean, I think about that, Jeffrey, and I, to me, the worst, okay, First of all, I think that we're always, I will be till the day I die on my journey, no matter where I am, whether I'm not moving forward or moving forward, I'm on that journey no matter what. But number two, to me, activism, in some realms, the activism is being active in white churches and white institutions and white communities to move white people. It's not about what can we do to help Black people. I don't know if there's anything we can do. And I often, when you hear younger Black people, they're like, we don't need anything from you. You guys need to go work on yourselves. And it's not our job, that from the side of younger Black, it's not our job to educate you and to put that burden on us. And so to me, activism comes from the work we do individually, but the work we do with each other and in institutions that are white, basically. And there's still a lot of segregation, and it's easy to find white churches and schools that are white. And I also want to make another point, and this is a more difficult point to make, is that I know a lot of progressive white people, or I know more now than I used to, but when I hear them and see how they're living their lives, and I put this on myself as well, is we can talk about and take the actions necessary, but when we look at our own lives, where did we choose to send our children to school? What steps did we take to be in the so-called good neighborhood, the good schools? And maybe no one on this call is that white person, but I know progressive whites who consider themselves anti-racist, who have nonetheless taken steps to insulate their families and their children from what they perceive to be the bad schools and the bad neighborhoods. And so I just want to put that out there, that if you're not living a life that reflects what you are telling people, then that's a problem too.
Jeffrey, do you want to follow up on that, or all other people have thoughts about this?
I think that, oh, go ahead. Okay, I mean, I think that both can happen. You can need to do self-activism and figure out where you're at, but you also can do action as well. I think the action part is difficult because if you, and I guess I have like military, in my head, I have like military scenarios where you've got generals and they have plans, and you've got foot soldiers that carry out plans. And when you start and you're trying to figure yourself out, you may be a foot soldier. And if you are under a good general and a good army and you're fighting a just war, that's great. But if you are just carrying out orders and you don't really know what's going on, that's horrible. So, I mean, I think you need to educate yourself so that you are in what you believe to be a good battle, but you also need to surround yourself with other people that are thinking like you and doing what you think is great, and relying on them. And like I see this group of people, and you see where they're all a bunch of teachers and they have very similar things, and someone says something and that makes somebody spark up. So, I think that this is a good group of people that we all can learn from, and this is a good place to be. So, if you aren't far along in your self work, you can rely on people that may be further along than you to kind of keep you in the right direction, and you're going to be willing to put some skin in the game because you trust and you believe in the people around you. But you also need to continue to do that work so that the more skin you put in there, you still feel good that you're in the right place. So I think that both can happen, but definitely you have to work on yourself so that when you find yourself being more active, that it's still the good fight that you thought it was going to be.
Someone else had something to say about this?
I do. I think that I think both can happen, but I think it's really important to know where you are, and then that will help you know what you can do. So, for example, I used to work. Well, I still do the same kind of work, but I found myself, I was living in New Hampshire and in Peterborough, New Hampshire. And I was doing this kind of work. And so the partner that I was working with, we started doing, bringing together people to have these kinds of conversations like we're having now. And so we had one conversation, and the people that came were thinking about all the things that they could do for, I'm in New Hampshire, and they were thinking the Black community. So they thought Roxbury, we want to do this and do all those things. We want to go to Roxbury, do stuff for Black people who have all the issues. And so I said, well, that's not exactly what we're here today to talk about, because what we want you to do is, we as rich white people, well-to-do bankers and bank presidents, we want you to go home and sit in your on your dinner table and have race discussions with your family, with your children. And they were outraged. I mean, they were outraged. And so that was a big eye-opening experience to me, because they, just the fact that they became outraged, but they were really outraged that I would even point them to themselves and their families instead of saying, let's do something for the Black people. And so that was a big eye-opening experience to me. So there's not too much work that people can do on themselves before they can still do other things, but do that internal work. Alan has that experience. He's talked about it before.
So does someone else want to jump in? I would like to respond, but I really feel like it's important to let the group respond first.
I just wanted to say that in the inner work, the internal work, it's a continual practice that I will do for the rest of my life. I don't see it as a kind of thing that I will do, and then once I've done it enough, I'll wake up and ta-da, I won't be racist anymore, or white supremacy will be dismantled. It feels to me like, in order to do any sort of activism at all, and I appreciate that this has been said many times in different ways by people in the space already, but doing that work feels like such an important part of then going out into the world and expressing myself. And I also, in anti-racism activism, and I also wanted to say something about, in me, how the white savior can just get activated in the moment, and how I've really noticed that in the last sort of year or so, my white savior, it just comes out so quickly, and I've had to really work hard to notice that that's who it is, and accept and own that that's what's going on, is my white savior is coming out, and to go, okay, that's that, and then to start to work on when it, well, because it's going to come out, it's never not going to come out, but it's spotting when it's going to come out. So it's even things like that, so that when there is an activism, I do sit down, or an action that I want to take, I do sit down with myself and say, who is the one in me who wants to do this? Who is activated? I see you smiling, Diane. Who is the one in me wanting to do this, and why? And sometimes the answer comes back and it's not one I'm like, but it doesn't matter if I like it or not. The point is to ask the question, and then to sit with the fact that maybe the answer I'm getting isn't the one that makes me the most comfortable, but it doesn't matter, because my discomfort, I can handle that. I'm glad to know it. So I just wanted to speak to those two parts. And also, actually, there was one more thing that came, which was that thing of like white people being terrified and fragile and not resilient to go into the space of anti-racism or challenging white supremacy, because we feel like we don't know enough, and how that narrative gets perpetuated so much of like, oh, the good thing that white people can do is just sit and listen. And I think listening is important, but I think that gives us white people a really nice little get out of jail free card where we can just not, we can abdicate, we can practice our white apathy, and we can practice our white exceptionalism. So I think it's really complicated. That question brings up so much. Anyway, I just wanted to say those things.
Anyone else want to respond? And if not, I will respond. I just want to, again, make sure all the people have felt a chance to talk.
Annie
Okay.
has spoken.
Someone hasn't,
Annie.
did you want to speak, Annie?
I've been mostly listening and taking notes on the discussion, and I think what Jordan said about it being a lifetime journey is true for all of us, because Black people have also internalized so much of the unhealthy attitudes and the self-esteem, the damage to self-esteem and confidence that we all have to come to the understanding that if we want to live a better life and improve our perspective on things and how we see other people, one of the first things is is dialogue and putting ourselves in challenging positions. For instance, one thing that I've said in the past is in my experience with college students, white people felt very uncomfortable being in the minority, whereas people of color are used to being in a minority, whether you're the only one or one of a few. And purposely putting yourself in that position helps you to understand some things about yourself, and having dialogue such as this one also help you to think about some concepts or perspectives that you have, and the discussion can often help you to sometimes change those perspectives. So we are all constantly growing and learning, but we can only get better by interacting with different people and not just staying in our comfort zones with people like us.
So I have a lot of respect for Jordana and what she says, but she knows I'm going to totally disagree with this. Totally disagree with it. Which doesn't mean I fundamentally don't think that white people have to work on their stuff, because that's just true. So I'm going to just flip the script a little bit. I'm even going to flip it on you, Diane. It's easy for
I
white
want to
people.
hear it. I want to hear it.
Yeah, it's easy for white people to talk about how badly they feel about shit and what they do, and let's talk to each other and work our inner child and blah, blah, blah. It's much harder for white people to go out into the neighborhood and do organizing with other white and black folks around the material conditions that racism creates: housing, education, etc. I can go on and on, whatever it is. We just gave millions and millions of billions of dollars to the Ukrainians, right? But we don't have money to even fix the housing in our school or our schools. I don't have to be completely woke to feel angry at the oppression. I just don't. And actually, I'll learn more by being in that struggle with other folks who will pull my coattail, both black, more black than white, but black people who, so what I'm trying to say is we do need to do that work. So I'm disagreeing on two levels. One, our main work shouldn't be with white folks. That's one piece of it, but our work should be about, if we're really anti-racist, it's about attacking the material conditions that black folks and other folks face, whether it's in education, whether it's in housing, whether it's in the prison system. And there actually is a group called Show Up for Racial Justice, which is based, I work with it, based on anti-racist ideas, but going in and working with other. So Susie had said, well, maybe I have some white savior in me. I don't know, maybe I do. Who doesn't, right? No, I know you're not saying that about me, Susie. I'm saying just in general. But I'd rather see some white savior who's wanting to put their ass on the line and stopping an eviction or protesting at school committees where they're they're cutting budgets or et cetera, then telling a white person, you shouldn't be there until you get this all together in your head. Because again, I'm white. I know white people. They're much more comfortable talking about shit than doing what I call co-conspirators, where we're going to step into the struggle with you. So another good example was when Black Lives Matter happened in Atlanta. You probably all remember this. There was a battalion, Frank, army-like battalion of white folks who stood at the front of those lines because they knew what was going to happen. The people that we're going to really come after are always the black folks. But these white folks, they gave up their privilege and said, you know what? I'm putting myself at the front of this line. And if I have a little white savior in me, so be it. I don't want to negate. So please, I know Jornana knows this because we've had these. I do not want to negate. We have to do work amongst ourselves with other white people, but mainly our work should be what Kendi talks about, doing anti-racist work, wherever that takes us. And so, Diane, got love for you. Why even waste your time talking to white bankers and white rich people? People know I curse. Fuck them. I don't need to be working with them. They're not the ones that are going to make the social change anyway. So I say that with love. It probably comes off a little too fiery for people. It doesn't mean I don't have some agreement. But in the end, to move from idealism to activism means we need to be active in the struggles that persecute and oppress people of color and other people. And I don't know if I'll ever be woke enough, but so I realize, I don't know why I'm apologizing. I'm not going to apologize from my point of view, though I feel like.
No, don't apologize.
So Hillary has her hand up, and I'm
Hi,
sure other people do as well.
Maybe somebody wants to go first. Go ahead.
I do want to say this, please. I know, Jordana, you feel this. This is not coming at you or other people who have those ideas as you're the enemy. I hope you don't feel that way. I feel like,
Lew, so I don't feel that at all. And I do understand your point. It's just when you talk about white people going in to support and deal with evictions and all of that, and you talked about black people pulling your coattails if you overstep or you say something or do something wrong. So number one, that is a problem because a lot of white people, and I've seen this, the minute they think they're out there doing the good work and they get their coattail pulled for whatever reason, they often will skedaddle away because they've been insulted, and if you don't want me here. So that's a problem. And also the toxicity of a lot of white people, even progressives, is such that you can be in the fight and be doing a ton of damage because you think that that's all you need to do. And you think that makes you a good white person to do that without having really done the work. And believe me, I am not the flower child person, believe me. Okay, even Diane can tell you there's a lot of this inner work stuff that I don't understand it. I don't feel comfortable with it, and I'm trying to. And that's definitely not where I am, even though I feel like I need to work harder on that. But I feel like white people damage Black people just by their presence and the way they come into a situation as if they're going to be the leaders. And Susie used the term white savior, which to me, it's very important to look at that, because you might be in there trying to stop an eviction or whatever the activism is. But if in the process, you're not allowing other people to use their power or supporting their power, then that's a problem. And of course, I know, and I saw in Black Lives Matter, a kind of different energy with certain white people and young white people who got in there and didn't usurp the power of Black leaders. And that was really good. And it seemed unusual to me. But I just think that maybe it's true, two things can go on at the same time. But to me, anti-racism is also working with white people, the vast majority, who really don't give a shit about any of this. They even don't really give a shit about anything except their own family and their children and what's best for them. It's a very selfish and narcissistic view. And that's part of whiteness as well, in my opinion.
Yeah. So we have like 10 minutes left. So if we could hear for some other voices, and then I like to do a closing thing, taking about 3 minutes. So is it possible for people to stay to 2:05 instead of 2 o'clock? Good. So we're going to go to 2 o'clock with this great debate that we're having, really important ideas. And then I just want to do a little closing for people.
And I would like Frank to be able to announce the next thing that we're doing.
Oh, yeah, of course. So Frank, and then a little closing. So please, other people jump in, because we don't want this to be a one-way, two people's conversation. So I think Hillary, you had your hand up. Is that correct?
It also looked like Alan wanted to talk. He has something in the
Okay,
chat.
Alan, let's do this. Could everybody raise their hand who would like to talk? One. Alan, your hand up or no? It is not. Hillary and Diane, your hand is up? Okay, so we have two. Could take, we have like 10 minutes. We'll see where we are. So Hillary, then Diane.
And I was just going to say, I put my hand down because when Jordana responded to you, Lou, all I was going to do is explain it the same thing differently. So it's been said.
Appreciate you for doing that. Hillary, then Diane.
I can say the same thing. I completely agree with Jordana. And wherever we are in the line, as white people, we can never take off our mantle of whiteness, number one. Number two, it's not up to Black folks to correct us in any way at all, period. So I just really did want to say that.
Okay.
No, and I know everybody agrees with that. I just felt like saying it.
Diane.
Yeah, I do have something to say, but I also know that Alan has his own way of dealing with, of looking at this, and I would like for him to bring that out if he will. So the thing that I most want to say is that when you think about bank presidents and rich white people, and you think about white supremacy, and you think about the whole structure of everything, the education system, the health system, the finance, they're going to be making the decisions about this. So I think it's really important that people that are in position to make decisions about policies that are going to be put in place, I think I can't think of anything more important than to have them reflect and think about how, their own families, teach their own children. So that's it. Alan, sorry.
Alan,
So now I will expand, and it starts with, what Jordana said as far as, that two things can be, or more than two things can be, quote, valid, carry truth and carry weight. And then Diane, what you just said, and the main thing I was going to say is that there has always been this torn thing for me where I've heard it's attacking the institutions, attacking the institutionalized racism. And I'm going to say that it's interesting that whenever I've stepped up and owned my own stuff, and when I've talked to people that clearly are in the positions of power, like you talk about, Diane, that's where I get the most pushback. And the reason that I've done it is that we might want to call it institutionalized, but there are people that are the ones that have the power in those institutions that are the ones that change it. And I'm not going to be an expert here, but what's going on in football and their hiring system, what's making the change happen there is that the people in power there are feeling their names, their faces on the front page, on the news, as being attacked as controlling racist institution of NFL hiring and management and in administration. So that type of confronting individual and personal racism actually does get at the institution. And then finally, that it's not just a monolith. And I forget, Diane, if I've shared, I probably have. But when the Black Lives Matter protests happened in Los Angeles, on one part of my Facebook, I'm defending my Black stepson, who's an LAPD officer, and he hears it from white PD officers, and he gets it from white people and Black protesters and Black Lives Movement across the lines. So he's getting it there, and I'm in a position of defending him and feeling for him. And then at the same time, I've got my nephew posting the example you gave, Lew, of putting himself on the front line and, either getting, I don't think he got beaten, but I think the violence from the police got closer to him than he was probably expecting. So he was very disturbed. So it's depending on, what is part of our lives and what is part of our realities and our families and what we expose ourselves to does influence, how we see what action can look like. I'll stop.
Frank had his hand up.
Yeah, and I just would dovetail on Alan. I think, and like I said in the beginning, I think everything is action. When you do self-work, that's action. When you go out and you put yourself on the front lines, that's action. And to use the Black Lives Matter with the white folks in the front, I would say that they had to do some kind of introspection to think that it's important for them to be out there in the front line. And you have to have that work because your average Joe white guy is not going to be there. So there was something that happened within them that made them say, okay, well, it's important for me to be there because I can be what stops some person of color from catching hell or getting killed or who knows, because they're less likely to hit me. So I make it close to the action, but they will see a white face and they go, well, not that guy. And as many people as there were, if there were more people that had done that introspection, there could have been more people on the front lines. As many people as there were, we may still be talking about it now, because if you think about it, that movement is gone. Everyone that thought heavy enough to go out and do something, they're not there, or they're not getting the publicity or something, but something has changed and it's kind of receded. So that kind of continual push isn't there. And it goes back to like critical mass and having people keep coming in. And if you're always willing to do the work and talk to people, then you can keep people coming into that movement. And I would say that, again, all of these things are action. They're all important. And everyone here is doing something. And again, like you said, Lew, we all have our expertise. And my expertise may not be on the front line. It may be talking to a banker, or it may be something, but it's doing the work, figuring out what you're good at, and then using it. Because the crime is if you find out you're good at something and you don't do anything with it. So, and I think the more that we talk to each other, and the more we kind of interact with other people like us, and we're drawn out of those things, then the more good work we do, because we'll realize that we're not alone.
So we're almost at 2 o'clock. I'm assuming people would like to stop at 2:05. I find this conversation absolutely fascinating. I could go on for hours, but are we all agreeing we're going to stop then at 2, make an announcement, do a little closing activity? Okay, beautiful. So we have 1 more minute, and I am not going to take the mantle of saying the last thing. So does somebody want to say something else? Thank you, Ann. And then we will go to our announcement and closing.
What I'm thinking is very brief, and it is sort of follows what Frank was talking about in terms of Black Lives Matter. I think that you don't always need to have marching in the streets. That what I'm seeing here in Mississippi, in Jackson, is a lot of dialogue going on, and what I've been observing on BBS, a lot of book writing. So books are coming out. Issues are being expressed in different ways, and the dialogue is helping to move some people along, and for you're never going to get everyone, but if you can reach those people who are in positions of what they used to call gatekeepers, those people who do the hiring and who are in position to keep people out, then those people are very important in terms of moving toward activism and allowing opportunity for other people to move forward.
Okay, well, I want to thank everyone first, and then Frank has an announcement, and then we'll just do this little short activity.
Okay, can I just make a comment, one short comment?
Sure.
The thing that motivates me these days is the awareness that there's nobody, none of us, no one we know, we don't know what it's like to even think about living in a system that is not white supremacy. It's not supremacist something. I mean, so, and if we're in the West, it's white supremacy. It's been going on for hundreds of years. And so the challenge for us really is to come up, how are we even going to begin to create in our own minds and envision something different when all we know is white supremacy? So how do we even do that? So that's the question. from me. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you, Diane. So Frank, your announcement?
Yeah, and I just dropped it in the chat. So we're having our next event, which will be April 23rd from 12 Eastern Standard to 3. It's going to be Advantage versus Adversity, opening the door to reparations dialogue. So I think a lot of the themes that we've been talking about will be carried over into this event. So definitely make sure it's going to be a donation-based ticketed event. So we really appreciate if people come out and bring their comments and questions and thinking hats to walk through this stuff with us.
And
Okay.
Jordana is one of the presenters there, so you'll hear more from Jordana then.
Yeah, and she's very dynamic. You'll enjoy it. Everyone doesn't, because it would take more than 5 minutes. It'd be great if everyone did it, even if you just do it in your own head then, but maybe 3 or 4 people will share. What's one takeaway you had from this that's either new to you or challenged some of your thinking or made you even think about it a little differently? So it's either it's new or it challenged your thinking. It would be the 2 ways to think about this. And it could be both, but either one of them to take away, because I'm an old school teacher. I want us to take something out of this. Jordana.
Just that, I mean, I guess I've been thinking about it, but this reinforced the idea, you know, from what you said, Lou, and what Frank said, that there's activism in everything and that everyone has a role to play and they should figure out what their strength is. And even while they're doing their inner work, which will take forever, that doesn't mean you just sit and work on yourself. You can do other things as long as you're aware enough not to damage other people.
Thank you. A couple other people? Something new or something that challenged your thinking?
That's still getting me thinking about, and Diane's last question is partly responsible for that comment, about how Black and white people can work together, work in the same place, and sort of with ourselves experience space that doesn't feel overwhelmed by 200 or 300, 400 years of white supremacy.
Yep. Thank you. Couple other people? Somebody be my good students and help this teacher out right now. You're not even laughing at my jokes. Okay. Hillary, thank you.
You're welcome, Lou. Now that I'm quite happily retired as about a month, I'm thinking, what next? What can I do? Because all that I've known is being a teacher and then some other things that I've done. But so there's that. And then I'm also thinking about my African-American friends or Caribbean American friends and how is this conversation going to lead me into other conversations with them?
Right.
What does that mean? What does that look like? And I'm talking about a back and forth conversation, not teach me conversation, but back and forth conversation that I've never initiated with them perhaps, or rarely.
Okay, so enough of me asking people. So we'll end up with it. I just want to thank people for coming. It was a good discussion. I think it was respectful. I think we got to dig in on for an hour. We dug in pretty deep. So just wanted to thank you. And I will see you at the next one, which is April what, Frank?
23rd.
23rd, I'm sorry.
And if anyone is interested, I'm in the Boston area. There is this group called Show Up for Racial Justice. If you're interested in finding more out about it and seeing the stuff that we do, it'd be great. And there is a group that specifically deals with white supremacy, believe it or not, that talks with other white folks. That's one of the activist groups. We have about 7 of them. So I want to thank everybody, and I think we should have a nice afternoon.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Lou.
Thank you, Lou. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you,
Thanks, Lou,
Lou.
for facilitating. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Everybody. Have a
Bye,
good week, a
everyone.
peaceful
Thanks,
week.
everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody.
See you on the 23rd.
Thank
All
you.
right.
23rd.
Bye. Bye.